All righty, boys and girls, welcome back to yet another episode with your hosts, Alex and Chris. This is too important for a nickname. Condit, your American villain voices, and as always, the lukewarmest of lukewarm opinions. As we've teased for quite a while now, we've got a huge, very, very exciting interview today. Chris, we're talking with Paul Faulkner and High Sheriff of the West Midlands, Doug Wright, MBE. How hyped are you?
I'm very hyped. If you guys jumped on to catch the interview, they're coming. They're just not here yet. And we're recording this intro ahead of time. So if anybody came on and said, wait, I thought we had a big interview, and then it's just our two smiling faces, I can understand the disappointment. But yes, I am super excited. Doug Wright, MBE, and Paul Faulkner, former CEO of Aston Villa and Nottingham Forest. Sort of a once-in-a-lifetime kind of interview that you would never have thought that our little podcast would have landed. So I'm super, super pumped, and I can't wait to talk with the guys.
Yeah, we've got a nice little topics of conversation here. I mean, we're certainly going to hear about Paul's experience at Aston Villa under Randy Lerner. We'll dive a little bit into, we'll say, the business of football and get his exclusive experience as a chief executive, how they kind of view managing PSR and transfers and all that kind of stuff. We're into the window, so we'll talk about the transfer window a little bit and on the pitch. And then Douglas Wright, as an illustrious local representative of Birmingham and supporter of the club, certainly want to hear from him about all the charity work that he, but importantly, like what the club means to him, what it means to the city. Obviously, we are the American villain voices. We know what the club means to us, but getting his perspective and obviously hearing about his relationship with Paul is going to be really fascinating for me. So I'm excited to dive right into it. They'll be here in a few minutes, and so we'll be right back after this short break.
All right, and we are back, and we're joined by two very illustrious guests, Paul Faulkner and Douglas Wright, MBE. Most of you will probably know Paul Faulkner as the former CEO of Aston Villa from 2010 to 14, CEO of Nottingham Forest from 2014 and 15. He's the co-founder of Element 45, chairman at Ellison's, interim CEO of the Kids Village, and I believe I have this right, Paul, 2024 Brummie of the Year. Did that?
That's right. Yeah.
And then
sat next to a previous winner of the Brummie of the Year as well.
I was going to get to him. I don't have his year though. I couldn't find it. So if you could help me out there. But so he's sitting with Douglas Wright, MBE, CEO of McDonald's franchisee, operating 26 McDonald's, employing almost 3,000 people. He's also the High Sheriff of the West Midlands, which Alex and I have questions about. And he's the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce patron. And as Paul said, a former Brummie of the Year. What year was that, Doug, that you won Brummie of the Year as well?
Or more, how many times
have you? In 2022.
22. Okay, so two very recent Brummies of the Year here that we're joined by. And again, guys, thank you so much for joining us from across the pond. We really, really appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
And I'd like to start with Doug. So the first thing that Alex and I both wanted to know was the High Sheriff of the West Midlands sounds like a really cool title. But as an American, or as Americans, what does that mean, and what does that title entail, and what does that role look like in the UK?
Yeah, so when I got the letter myself saying I was being appointed the High Sheriff of the West Midlands, I had to reach out to our good friend Google and to find out exactly what it was. And it's a role that emanates back from Saxon times. And as the title suggested, it was law enforcement, collecting of rent and royalties, levying fines and taxes. Fast forward to 2024, and the role is a combination of championing the work of the emergency services. Primary role is in the judicial system as the sort of most senior person in the judicial system in the county, and then a lot of civic, charitable and community events. So for 1 year alone, you get to represent His Majesty the King. So a wonderful honour. and I'm 9 months into it, was apprehensive about the role, but it's turned out to be the best year of my life. And I've met so many, many wonderful people who are doing exceptional stuff in our community for the betterment of many others.
And Doug's done an amazing job as High Sheriff this year, guys. He's sort of elevated the role in a way that no one's done it before, which is brilliant to see. The one thing you won't be able to see on the podcast, that as High Sheriff, he's actually sat in a pair of Spurs here under the table. So that's another that's maybe for a follow-up. Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll get the photo for socials after this. That's for sure. It'll just be the show.
I'm glad that it sounds like a really fulfilling role, and it sounds like you've really enjoyed it. So that's appointed annually, and it's someone different each year, I assume. Yes.
Yeah, it's never really. It's done. It's appointed by people on committee. I think the man on my left even sat on the committee, so I probably got him to thank amongst many other people. But I suppose the big thing is, in a world where people dwell on negative so much, it's so lovely to go out and see, as there are issues and troubles in our community, that individuals, communities, charities have got together and co-created solutions to make sure the world and the county we live in, the West Midlands, is a safer and better place to live. So now it's been amazing. And I think, when you look at the size of the county at 3 million, it really has been a marvellous opportunity for me to get to understand in more detail our own backyard, which I always thought I knew so well.
That's amazing. I got your e-card around Christmas, and it was really, really insightful to read through. Really, really powerful stuff.
And we wanted to start with that because we wanted to start with positives, because we tend to, or at least especially me, I tend to look at positives more than negatives, which I think is refreshing in this atmosphere, and especially with podcasts, most everybody kind of harps on the negative, and we try to, if we're talking something negatively, we always try and bring a positive spin to something. There's always positives you can highlight in just about every
We're
aspect.
both positive people, so that resonates with us, definitely.
Yep. So now, Paul, if you could tell us about, how did your career begin at Aston Villa? What was the connection point for you?
So I worked for the Lerner family before they bought Aston Villa. So I was working for them in the States, spending time in New York and Cleveland. As you know, we were saying, Chris, the family owned the Cleveland Browns NFL team at the time. And one day, Randy Lerner walked into the office and said, I'm thinking of buying a football team, I think he would have called it, and take a look at it. And so it began very early in 2006 with a good period of due diligence, and reasonably quickly we identified Aston Villa as a club which met a lot of the criteria that we were looking for. And there was a number of things around that. Number one, of course, it was available, which something has to be available. But it was more than that. It fit about a big club with a great history in a sizable market, and a market that you could sort of dominate, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And, just to extrapolate, London's an amazing city, but there's, an awful number of top flight clubs, let alone just professional football clubs, and you get lost in the shuffle there. You move up to Birmingham, the UK's second city, and Aston Villa is without a doubt the preeminent football. I don't want to get too parochial about that, and but you just look at the history and you look at the size of the stadium and everything, and you go, that is the dominant brand. Others will want to challenge that, and Blues and Wolves and West Brom and Walsall, and all sort of close to home, and your rivals are important, but Villa sort of sits there as the biggest brand. And we thought that not dissimilar to Cleveland, to be honest, as well, as a sort of an industrial town where sport really means something. It really means that go into the game and the result, and people sort of really live and die by the success or otherwise of their sporting teams. And we thought we could apply some lessons and learnings from the US to the UK and went ahead and I was part of the team who purchased the club for the Lerners in 2006, and so that's when my journey started there.
So I had the same idea in terms of the similarities between the West Midlands, Birmingham, and Cleveland. When I visited Birmingham for the first time, it felt very similar to me in terms of the type of people, the passion for their teams, it's blue collar type, what we would call in America, blue collar type town of hardworking people, and so that resonates 100%. And just as an aside, I never have met Randy Lerner, but I had met his mother on a handful of occasions. Mrs. Lerner was always very kind to me when
she's an amazing lady, amazing family, and I mean certainly what they've done in Cleveland and for the hospital and the arts and even obviously the story of sort of Al Lerner when he purchased the franchise and got the Browns back with all of the history. That was people who get it deep in their DNA, and wonderful people. But you're right, that link between Ohio, Cleveland, and Birmingham and the West Midlands was very real, very much part of that purchase back in 2006. Yeah.
Is there anything that you would want Aston Villa fans to know about Randy Lerner that maybe they don't know, or because I know some folks have a negative opinion of him as an owner because of the way things ended, but I never felt like it was because of an issue of dispassion or anything like that. I think that Randy cared very deeply about the Browns, Aston Villa Football Club, and all those things. I think that maybe some of his reputation, in my opinion, is unearned.
I mean, he's a wonderful man. And of course, I mean, cared so deeply about the Browns, but about Villa, and was desperate for success. And that's winning any game, or the idea of being able to sort of restore glories. I think we used to talk about being very mindful that that you are only ever a custodian of these entities, and Villa, Browns, other sports teams, owners come and go, don't you? But the club endures, and that sense of what it is. And we mentioned about the DNA and the fan base. It runs through families and communities, and they enjoy. So you're only ever a custodian, and when you have your hands on the wheel, you do your very best to try to set things up in the right way. You want to be successful. Everyone does. Everyone who's involved in sports wants. That's why we love it, because it's so competitive. You can't chase success at any cost, because you've got to leave a lasting legacy. I mean, we had sort of 4 years where we were just on the up, and look, I've been around long enough. We know how history gets written, and people will dwell on certain things. But 2006 to 2010. We did an awful lot of winning. We came 6th 3 years in a row. In all of those 3 years, we were pushing for the top 4, sliding doors in another parallel universe. We could have got in there. We could have had that Champions League music sort of 14 years earlier than we actually eventually ended up hearing it. The League Cup final in 2010, I mean, Philip Dowd, how he did not send Vidic off when he fouled Gabby. I just do not know. Again, had justice been served, we'd have lifted the Carling Cup, and who knows what history would have been. But and Aston Villa deserved that, not just Randy, and he wouldn't have put himself there, but the club did, the fans did. But it didn't happen, and you've got to learn. In sport, people win and people lose. That year, just to finish, I remember right at the end of the season, we were in the chase for 4th place until the very end, and we ended up not quite getting it. I think City did actually that year. We actually, in the week, we also managed to lose the reserve final, and you lose the Youth Cup final. And in a way, you go, what an awful week. We've kind of got there and lost all 3 of those really big games, and you feel pretty low. But then on the flip side, it was amazing that the youth team, the reserve team, and the first team were all up there absolutely challenging and competing, and it was so close. Now, again, apart from the Peace Cup, don't forget that we didn't land any silverware. But you know, the legacy Randy left. You look at the stadium, you look at the whole pub, you look at the training ground, you look at the investment that was placed into the bricks and mortar, the infrastructure, let alone the playing side. And I think it's very tangible, that legacy. Now, people go, if you don't get success on the pitch, it doesn't matter. But, you know, I go back to Villa Park a fair bit now, thanks to my good friend Doug here and others. And, you know, I see a lot of what we did and Randy sort of led 18 years or so ago, which is still there and in place, needed doing. And you don't necessarily get thanked for that. But I think it's all part of the foundations which, you know, help the club to be where it is today.
Yeah, let me add to that.
Sure.
You know, Paul was very close to that as, you know, running the football club. But as a punter and as a fan, Randy Lerner deserves rock star status because he bought a business that was broken. It was devoid of investment. You know, under Doug Ellis, he literally ran it as a business and it had to make money. The stadium was creaking. You know, Randy Lerner was a breath of fresh air because somebody who wants to make the place better has to invest money. And, you know, we all of a sudden we had hospitality areas that were fit for purpose. You know, it was very much about fans. It was about, you know, any kind of business, you have to start and cast the foundations. And, you know, Randy had to really lay foundations. And what he did up at Bodymoor Heath, what he did in the lounges, and he was very fan-centric. You know, he cared about getting it right. And I'd been to a lot of football before Paul and Randy arrived. And, you know, if someone had said in 1999, 2000, you're going to finish 3 years running, we often forget about that. But they were very, very exciting times. Mm-hmm. And, you know, somebody who cares about their football club, it really, really, that pride started to sort of really spread into the community. And that, you know, one of the things that he'll do, and Paul did, was amazing. You know, he put a charity, a local charity, on the front of a football shirt. And if he'd done nothing else, that was a first and something that set a model of, if you want to care about your community, find out what matters. So you could probably talk about that better. So as a fan, very happy, and like always the same, be careful what you wish for. Because when they left, it was like Franz Klammer on Ski Sunday. We went downhill very quickly.
Yes,
you're not wrong. Right. It seems like people are forgetting that right now, that just a handful of years ago we were back in the championship. But actually, Doug, apologies for this because we were remiss in not asking you this in the beginning. You just said you've been a fan for a long time. Obviously, you know, you're still around the club. That's how we met. Can you just talk a little bit about like where your Villa fandom started and maybe sort of how you and Paul got connected?
Gosh, so very quickly, started going when a neighbour used to go to Villa, took me to Villa. My dad was a musician and fell in love with Villa about 55 years ago. And, you know, little was I to know that I was to end up with one of my best friends in the world. And people always, how did you meet such a great friendship? And the reality was, I emailed him a complaint. And how good is that? So I emailed the guy a complaint, and guess what he did? He personally is the CEO of, you know, a football club, a Premier League football club. He got in contact with me. And, you know, in terms of, it's bizarre really when, you know, Paul's been at the forefront, a lot of the things I've succeeded personally, my own business, and always been a great mentor to me. But it's those light bulb moments where I wrote a complaint, and in typical Faulkner style, he closed it out so well that, you know, 20 odd years later, we're still great friends. And, you know, we met you guys on a stairwell, and, you know, my parents always said, you know, be kind to people and they'll come back in droves. And I think that you know, what Paul and I have done is we've tried to use our corporate carry for the betterment of others, whether it's through business contacts, community credentials, or charity work. But I was a lucky man that my complaint tick not only got answered, but it was to bring great joy and happiness into my life. So
Can you tell us what the complaint was?
Gosh, it was a very minor one, as Paul would say. But what he decided was that I was so important that he'd send me a scarf and something out of his memorabilia cupboard where they'd overproduced. But you know what? I was chuffed. And it's one of those moments that every time I get to speak on a stage, I always talk about it's the personalization and customization that whatever product, whatever brand, if the leader is so connected to his fan base that he'll reach out to you, that's a very special touch.
And I'll never forget it. And no, I hope Doug has now forgiven both myself and Aston Villa for the issue. But it actually went back to an issue that he had on a club trip to when we played Hamburg in the UEFA Cup, as it was back in sort of winter 2008. You know, the year when Martin Larsson scored that wonderful header against Ajax, and we get through to play CSKA Moscow. But they had some issues on the trip out to Hamburg when, and this is a good Villa trivia question. We lost 3-1. I don't know if you know who scored that day for Villa. Nathan Delfonte's first goal.
Oh my God, that's a throwback name. Wow.
But the anyway, we had this, and we were very proud, rightly, of Bodymore Heath, the training ground, which, you know, back in 2008 was probably a year old in terms of the development we've done there, and was state of the art. And we took a lot of the technology that they were using in Cleveland at the Browns and instilled it into the sports science part there, and invited Doug and his son Toby up training ground and to have a look around. And, you know, we would do that for fans and season ticket holders and sort of that come and see behind the scenes. And yeah, I guess, you know, you kind of hit it off. But seeing Doug's commitment to the community, and again over time, you know, and sort of going back nearly 20 years, you know, you see who's genuine, who really gives back, who's there through, you know, the bad times as well as the good times. And they're the sort of people in business, in life, who you are naturally drawn to. And I think that was the start of, say, a long and enduring friendship.
Chris, I think you need to complain about more things.
Yeah, maybe. But
really, it could really benefit us.
No, I don't. Paul, I don't know if Doug told you, the way we met was on a stairwell. Doug saw, I think it was how much Alex and I had in like our bags from the store, from the team store. And so he made a joke, and I just said, oh, you know, well, we're here from America, so we have to stock up, you know, and that started a conversation. We were supposed to come to your table to come meet you, but we couldn't because Peter With was talking to us at our table. And how am I going to tell Peter With, like, sorry, Peter, I got to go, you know?
Yeah, no.
You know? So you guys ended up coming to talk to us, which we very much appreciate. And that's kind of how all this started. But that, I mean, similar sort of thing, just a one-off remark. And it led to, you know, this, where we have a chance to talk to you guys, which we would have never had before, you know? So again, it's just, you can tell that you guys are very good people who are looking out for others, and I appreciate that. So along those lines, one question I wanted to ask you, Paul, as CEO, is there anything that you wanted to highlight from your time at Villa that maybe people don't know about, backroom staff, people on the ground that you want to highlight? Just, is there a story you want to tell about something positive that you remember from your time there?
Do you know, it'd be unfair to single out individuals, I think. I mean, just to say that all my time there, and really from 06 to 14 to 8-9 years, the people I worked with at Villa, be they, you know, across the club, so groundsmen, turnstile operators, stewards, matchday staff, tour guides, like the infamous McDale, you know, ticket staff, marketing, sales, finance, they were just the best people, and we were so dedicated, loved the club, would go that extra mile. And when we arrived, Randy in 2006, we changed the culture, we empowered people, and we didn't bring lots of new people in, really. This was a lot of people who'd been there, under the previous regime with Mr. Ellis, but they just cared, and we gave them that ability to do stuff, and we ended up winning all sorts of awards for, be it best security team, best hospitality, best ticket office, best merchandising, this, that. Jonathan Calderwood, who was the head groundsman at the time, him and his team, really set the standard for that amazing, beautiful pitch that's sat as a backdrop on the picture, and won as many sort of groundsman of the year's awards as you can get. I mean, ended up being so good, he got poached by PSG and the Qataris, believe it or not. I mean, the groundsman, but you take a bit of pride in that. So it was just the people. It was most time, and I'm still in touch with so many of them, and have continued to work with a number of them, and any of them watch us, they know who they are. You mentioned Doug and I are involved in the charity called Kids Village, and the lady who runs that now, I remember she joined Aston Villa in the marketing team, I think in 2007 or 8. So Katrina worked with me at Villa, worked with me at the Chamber. Now she's leading Kids Village. So it was like that quality and caliber of people, amazing people who care. And in any walk of life, you can do an awful lot of that and almost overachieve. And so, yes, I get it. In a football club, ultimately you're measured on points you get on the pitch, yeah? But that isn't the be all and end all. It is also about, the approach and that sense of how a club is run, and our people are part of it, and those things really matter. And there are just a brilliant group of people there.
Yeah, I mean, I would sum it up and say as well, not many owners and CEOs can say this, but they ran a football club that respected and were respected by their community. It's a very unique thing in life to be able to say you connected with a local community. That local community is rightly so, very working class, very industrial, and people work very, very hard for their money. But what Paul and Randy did was they gave them value, and the West Midlands trusted the Faulkners because of the way they behaved both on and off the pitch. And, we touched on it earlier, but, how many owners would turn down a huge multi-million-pound check and say, no, we're going to put the local hospice on it? And that you look for moments where in history books, and when you look back and what people did, and that was a best in class first in the UK. And that's when people realised that Mr. Lerner, Mr. Faulkner, and the new Aston Villa was somebody who cared about their community. So for me, that would be to connect with your community and be loved and respected is a massive accolade.
I'm so
Doug,
glad
I
you said
love the
that.
way you're setting this up here. Yeah. You're really transitioning us forward as we kind of talk about the business of football and kind of what Aston Villa means to Birmingham. I think a question to both of you, I suppose. I'd like both your takes on it, Doug, as a fan, and Paul, just put your executive hat on for a second. Revenue becomes more and more a factor for clubs every single year. And I think you really started to see that tension amongst the fans, both local and international, as the club has tried to grow its global brand while still balancing, being accessible, affordable, and open to its local market. And I think that, you start to see that tension in some of the dialogue online. So, Doug, I would love for you to kind of expand upon what Aston Villa and what a club means to Birmingham. It's a bit different than the franchise model here in America, where as much as Chris may love the Cleveland Browns, I don't think there's as much of an assumption that the Browns are going to make tickets affordable for everybody. And then Paul, I would love your perspective just from an executive boardroom level. How are you guys having those conversations to balance a ticket price increase versus another sponsor, spending money to open a store in New York versus opening one in Birmingham, and how those decisions might kind of come to bear in the boardroom itself?
Yeah, there's a lot there, Alex. I mean, just on the sort of final point, I mean, I've got to remember we would agonize over price rises, you know, where you'd look at 1%, 2%, and we're looking at, you know, the whole piece on a season ticket and juniors and what the match day ticket would be, and trying to strike that balance of revenue
Sure.
and being fair and accessible, and it's hard. I mean, there is a really sort of the dirty truth in football. Yeah, we got a graph and we plotted league position and wage bill, or maybe the other way around, and drew a line. There would be a correlation there. Yeah, the more you spend on your team, the higher you're going to come up in the league. Now, some years you will overachieve, and that may be down to, you know, a great manager or a Leicester moment and whatever, where they would have been way above the line. Years you're going to underachieve, but over time you plot that out, that's what's going to happen. That's the same in the Premier League, that's the same across the globe, and, you know, all the way through the pyramid. There's a reason why Birmingham City and Wrexham are in the top 2 or 3 in League One, because they've got the 2 highest payrolls. Yeah. There's a reason why Manchester City are the 4-time defending Premier League champions. Yeah, because they've got the highest payroll. So, you know, you need to be able to spend on your squad you want to achieve. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard, or you're relying on all sorts of other factors. So, yes, it is massively important. It is about getting the balance, knowing why you're doing it, I suppose, and really understanding your club and that DNA and what is the purpose. I mean, you look at Brentford at the moment in the Premier League. I think it's a great example of a community-based club who, you know, they have a model where no one is bigger than the club. They don't make success the be-all and end-all, but lo and behold, success is a byproduct of doing things really, really well. And they've had the greatest 4 or 5 years in their history. My uncle was a Brentford season ticket holder for 70 years. He passed away just in their first year in the Premier League. And this is the greatest thing it's ever been. So, and in that time, they've also been able to build a new stadium because of the revenue that the club has generated. They have transformed. That is success. Now, do they need silverware in the next years to underline that? Not really, you know. And I think it's about a little bit of balance and perspective on that. I mean, the only other thing I'd just say, I'll let Doug come in, and was just, what does Villa mean to Birmingham? An awful lot. I think in a way, though, it's more, I think of it as more than just what does it mean to Birmingham. It's like, what does it mean to the Villa family, the Villa diaspora? And they're not just in Birmingham. You look in the 30-mile radius, there's an awful lot of Villa fans in Redditch or in Tamworth or down the M5 corridor here in the UK or over in the States or whatever. And Villa means an awful lot wherever you are, and it may mean slightly different things. Look at you guys, yeah, and the commitment that you've got. Your mum sewing that wonderful cushion that you showed us, Alex, there, and that's commitment, you know. So it means an awful lot. And again, when you're a custodian, that's hard because you've got an awful lot of different component parts to try to balance up. But you kind of do have to draw and understand on that history, heritage we talked about Friday night, you know, the 150th anniversary match. Well, there's an awful lot that goes into that, and it's a tricky tightrope to walk, to be respectful and to also have success. When, as we were saying, you know, it is so driven by finance. And again, right now, Villa are competing against nation states who own clubs. So that's a very tricky equation.
I mean, look, you know, how do you just CEO's view? Probably by giving you my own sort of interpretation. I think that a football club, you know, is a business, but it is a community. And I think that, you know, to ask the question you said about, you know, pricing elasticity, about how far you can stretch it. I think if you look back 25, 50 years ago, how a football club was, that, you know, it was predominantly season ticket holders. You had a pie and a pint, you bought a program and you had a pie on the way home. And that was what that would be in old days, experiential. Running a football club is terribly hard work now because, you know, it's all about how your reach globally. And, to have the pleasure of talking to you today, I think it's wonderful to see how Aston Villa, through the likes of the Lerners, has, reached out into America and beyond. I just think it's really, really important from a fan's perspective that they never forget the fans, that the fans are their bread and butter. At the moment, we're in dreamland. We've got a manager, Unai Emery. We're in the Champions League. I remember in September going to the Bayern Munich game, and I never thought I would probably see Champions League football. And I didn't realise that I would get a tingle through my body when I heard the music and the stars in the centre circle. So, yes, in terms of when everything's great on the pitch, you can push everything and you want more revenue, but never alienate yourself from the community and the fans, because people like me will still be there when we've got trouble times on the pitch. So it's really important that you expand in a controllable way and that your velocity plan has got longevity, and under at the heart of it are fans, because we're all fans, we all care. Each owner will be the guardian of something incredibly special for a very long time, but never forget the fan, be fan centric, use digital to take us to different parts of the world. When you dissect the balance sheet of Aston Villa, about 96% of your revenue is going to be away from the stadium, whether it's television, money, etc. So if you're cunning and you're clever, you'll make sure that 4% of your revenue will always be there through great and bad times, that you look after them and you have a plan which makes sure that football is affordable, accessible, and it's community led. So for me, wonderful, we're on a global platform, but don't forget people like me, the average punter, who will be there through thick and thin.
And I think that's that thing about being a custodian. You may own it, but you are going to at some point pass it on, and Aston Villa will still be there, and you want to, your legacy is to pass it on in a better state than when you got it. And there is something about Aston Villa which is very special, and I used to feel this, when you're running it, almost like you hold, the club should hold itself to higher standards. Yeah, it's Aston Villa. It means something. There's that beautiful symmetry about the name. 5 letters and 5 letters ending in an A. It's that William McGregor statue. It's the fact that this club has helped to shape the game. It's the colours. It's all of that magic that as Villa fans you kind of know makes it that little bit more special. There's nothing plastic about Aston Villa, and so that's a weighty legacy, and I think that's about understanding the entity, the organisation. That's not just about Birmingham. That's just that back to that DNA of the club, and that has to form your actions and your behaviour, and what makes it so special, both in the past, right now, and again in the future. It was funny actually, just when Doug mentioned about the Champions League music, because we used to talk with Randy, with Martin O'Neill, about when we were chasing those top 4 places, about just wanting to hear the Champions League music at Villa Park. And I remember Martin really clearly saying that he really drove him. It was the music, and of course we didn't quite get there back in those days. And I remember my wedding in 2011. Martin had moved on, and maybe it was starting to seem further away. So I actually had it played as we walked out of the church. So I thought there's maybe the only time I can get it. There's actually Zadok the priest. Yeah, that's the music. And we kind of walked out, and I was there in my head, kind of lifting up the trophy almost. So I was at the Bayern game, and when I heard it, it did. It sent a shiver down the spine and a tear in the eye.
I had
really eloquently put. Yeah. You brought a little tear to my eye there, and well done. But enough of the love and whatnot. I think Chris wants to dive into the business a little bit more. He's our local finance expert on this podcast.
Well, there's been a lot around FFP and how the club can stay competitive, and it's a difficult balance to strike. And Paul, I know you've done some interviews previously where you've talked about your stance on FFP. for the record, we have similar stances. We agree.
That's good.
Yeah. I just, could you kind of, and Doug, feel free to jump in as well. Could you guys elaborate on how the board handles FFP concerns, and then from a fan's perspective, Doug, as well, how do you think the current group is managing it, and how do you think we can move forward as a club and as a group?
So obviously, I'm not involved now, so I
Right.
can't know how they're handling it now, or the ins and outs. When I was at the club when FFP rules were discussed and debated, and ultimately we were one of, I think it was about 4 or 5 who voted against the rules. And why we did that 2011 or 10, 11 was, I suppose, kind of believing in the free market and believing that if you have the money, you should be able to spend it as you want. And it felt anti-competitive, especially at a moment where those clubs who maybe already had higher revenue and bigger stadia were going to draw up the ladder, and it seemed a bit serving. So we sort of took the view of going, well, that doesn't seem fair, not just for us as Aston Villa, but just for the integrity of the competition and for those who would follow, and why should it be a game like that? So that's why we voted against it. Back at the time, and you may have heard me say this in other interviews, but a lot of what drove the creation of those rules wasn't about stopping people who had the money from spending it, and this crazy situation now when it's so opaque, no one can understand, you know, you can spend and how not, and these losses and over 3 years, and it's a complete sort of bugger's muddle, really. It was back then, it was to stop bad people from spending money on clubs that they did not have. And you'll remember Portsmouth had hit real trouble and had been docked points and got relegated because they had an owner who was, you know, couldn't make sort of payments. Birmingham City at the time, and the previous ownership, had similar trouble. And so the rules were almost designed to stop, or were intended that, rather than to create the situation you got now, where players are being sold not on the merit, but because, you know, it's helping us to hit these rules. Homegrown players are being sold because they've got their net book value is higher, and you're kind of going, well, that's sort of creating weird behaviours. And I just think that I said to someone, there should be an amnesty on it, and almost everyone needs to go, right, hang on, this is not what we intended. This has now got out of hand. We're in a crazy situation. I can't for the life of me understand how there's no set, fixed, almost menu of penalties or issues. And sort of what we saw last year, where Everton and Forest were docked points, and they were docked different amounts for different infringements. You go, well, what does that mean? You've got this ongoing case of Manchester City right now, where if Everton had one issue and Manchester City have 147 or however many, well then, and Everton were docked 3 points, what would that equate to? And the whole point being, it's a mess. Yeah, and it's a complete. I just thought everyone should go, put the handbrake on. This is not what we meant. What are we trying to do here? What do we want to achieve in football? What are the controls and checks, and so that people don't spend beyond their means? That's fair enough, but it isn't what we've got right now, and I just don't think that's what the sport should be about, what football is about. I don't think it's healthy, and it doesn't seem like it's getting resolved right now. So,
and Doug, sorry, real quick before you go, Paul, I do want to put a fine point on something that you just said there, because you talked about the free market, but then at the end you talked about controls. You talked earlier about nation states owning teams, and obviously that competition imbalance. So I do want to be clear. I think you're saying there should be controls, just the current controls feel unweighted against, frankly, teams like Aston Villa that didn't necessarily have the revenues when they were put into place. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, yes, and I suppose you shouldn't be able to spend money that you don't have.
Right.
Yeah. So there should be checks and balances, like in any sort of business, yeah, to stop that from happening. And that's for the good of good of clubs, good of football, and their continuity. I don't want to see an owner blowing a club up. Yeah, I grew up in a town called Chester, and Chester City, a club I used to go and watch as a youngster, no longer exists because an owner ran it into the ground. And so I think there should be some checks and balances to stop that from happening. But, you know, if Newcastle, let's just pick a club at random, have the funds and want to spend them, then why should they not be able to? You know, if the owners have been decided to be fit and proper, then it feels like what we've got right now is a very convoluted, messy system that no one can understand, and people are talking about this rather than about, you know, what a wonderful player Morgan Rogers is, or, you know, kind of, could Forest in the 50th anniversary of Brian Clough come in there? Could they really mount a crazy challenge, or, you know, all of the good stuff in football? That's what I'm thinking, getting back to.
From my point of view as a fan, fans want three things. They want everything refreshed and updated, brought into modern times. There are rules that are not in touch with today. So fans want them updating. They want them to be transparent and easy to understand. And I think the other thing that I should say as a fan, we need to have a system that protects grassroots football and promotes clubs investing in their academies, so that they can find the next Jack Grealish, they can find the next Morgan Rogers, Jude Bellingham, because right now the rules almost encourage you, because of the way that homegrown players are depreciated on the balance sheet, it gives them a quick go-to about getting them out of trouble. So we need to get back to almost protecting. We don't want to have 11 foreigners or, you know, people from all around the world. Yes, we want to have global football teams and great success, but we've still got to look after our own people. And, like, you know, fans, is that everyone always knows the words of Jacob Ramsey, one of our own, because they're not difficult to remember. But as part of these rules, we've got to look after the local economy and encourage people to invest in people from 4 years upwards. Paul will tell you great stories about, you know, young players coming through, how much they invested in Jack Grealish, and, you know, Paul will tell you far more. But we've got to, so it's got to be updated, transparent, and it's got to look after and encourage people to have British homegrown talent on the field.
Doug's point about transparency is key as well for me, you know, and that's where right now, again, if anyone can really unpick these rules and what they mean, and who is and where, who's complying, who isn't, why not, why we've got to sell it, then I don't believe that they exist. And this is maybe, you know, you look to the NFL, and now where there are, you know, sort of salary caps and various things in place, but it's done in a very clear, easy, simple way. It's not contentious, is it? It doesn't need to be. Well, why can't we lift that? Football clubs are not complicated businesses, so this should not be. Emotionally they are, but from a sort of a business, they're pretty simple. So it shouldn't be that difficult. And I just think that's why I come back to that. I sort of use that clumsy phrase like an amnesty, but it's like going, let's be big enough to say this hasn't worked, and maybe what do we want, and let's bring it up to date and make it better.
I know this is the interview with you guys, but the model I always use is the Major League Baseball here in America. It's so simple. It's, you want to spend X number of dollars, you can spend it. If you go over that, you pay a luxury tax.
Yeah.
That's it. You know,
that gets pumped back into the game, and it's
correct. Yeah.
And so, yeah,
it gets distributed to the other 29 teams. You know, so that, like, I know it's a little more complicated with the pyramid, but the idea is not.
And what's happening, Chris, is from, say, when we were first discussing it in 2010-11 around the league table, you look now and it's getting worse. That's what I mean, like, about put the handbrake on and revisit it, because it isn't kind of getting clearer. So yeah.
Let's talk a little bit on the pitch, since we've spent a lot of time off. With the club's success last season and in the Champions League, it's been sort of a mix of highs and lows this season. I mean, you've got the Bayern game where we won, Bologna. You know, we've done quite well in Champions League. We've not done as well this season in the league table. How do you guys, both of you, how do you strike that balance to succeed in both the Champions League and the league table?
You know, I think the reality is that, you know, I said something earlier, we've got to remember where we've come from. You know, when you look at Newcastle, We'd all like to have deeper pockets and be able to stretch all these rules, but we're learning fast. We were Saturday, we were poor against Leicester. We're tired. We need a car that's running. We need the oil topping up. We need the oil topping up, and we need to see, do we need any extras or whatever? So we've got this window of opportunity. I think the manager's making sure he maximizes the transfer window, because for the first time we saw 2 goalkeepers on the bench on Saturday, and we also saw 2 kids who I've never heard of. So that, if that wasn't the owner saying, help me please, we're in dreamland, really. You be careful what you wish for. We're doing far better than I thought we would. There's a guy who works for me who's really cynical, and he would rather we were consistent and just in the Premier League, never mind that we're consistently 8th or 9th, and he'd be happy. When you go into fantasy land, the Champions League, we're doing way better than I thought. But like all of us, if we're asked to play a little bit more, and we're not just playing once a week, we're playing twice a week, and the second game of the week is even harder because it's the most competitive from around Europe, so it's tough. And you will find out in the next sort of 20 plus days how serious the owners are, because 2 things that they've got to obviously try and stay financially stable. But this is a big moment for the boss man, for Unai Emery, because, he is world class. When he got appointed, everyone went 3 letters. Wow. This doesn't happen to Aston Villa. So now the manager won't be happy with results in the Premier League. He will believe that, like any of us, that a little bit more money, please, chaps, and we can make it that little bit better. And you can sort of draw a comparison with Martin O'Neill always wanted more and more and more, and Paul and Randy were really, really accommodating, but in the end you can't keep stretching what you haven't got. So this month is going to really show to me, are the owners serious about Aston Villa? Are they serious about Mr. Emery? Because an owner's got a tough job, because they want success, but they've also can't just keep writing out checks. So watch this space, but I would expect a couple of big players to leave and a few to come in. But this is a big moment. But for me, I'm loving it. And, I'm going to say that as a McDonald's franchisee. But I'm also going to say it.
On brand. I love it.
Listen.
Doug's contractually obliged to say that in the interview.
Listen, to be speaking to Alex in 150 years, this was one of the very first football clubs back in 1874. Right now we're seeing stuff at Villa Park that most people didn't think they would see in their lifetime. So the wheels are going to come off the bus a little bit. I'll draw comparison with Newcastle. They had a wonderful season. Everyone said they were going to go on and push on in the Premier League and the Champions League, but things give. And it's like, not can afford to have a finite number of world-class players, but this is a big challenge. And can we keep Mr. Emery? Because imagine we don't buy any players. Imagine we peter out in the Champions League. We finish 12th in the Premier League. Mr. Emery's got big decisions to make. So you know better than that. What would your take be on it?
Look, I think being a football fan, it's a bit like life, isn't it? It's about the journey, not necessarily the destination. And the beauty of football is that it gives us so much to talk about. And look, we're sat with you guys on the podcast, and you get, the reach and audience that you get shows people are interested. And football's like a soap opera, yeah? It throws up so much that you can talk about that if it wasn't like that, it would be really dull and boring, and none of us would care. So and look, right now, we're sat 8th in the Premier League. We're not just doing okay in the Champions League. We're kind of pushing to be in that top 8 of this sort of weird group stage and get through automatically to the last 16. We've only ever done that, I think, once in our history, yeah, when we won the thing. So you're going, we've got the FA Cup, which we haven't won since the 50s, kicking off on Friday. So we're still in it. right now. Hopefully, the time this airs, that's still the case. You know, so
Yeah.
you should go. You could make a case of going. That's a pretty good hand. We'll take that. I think Doug's analysis of the situation is pretty accurate. I went to the Crystal Palace League Cup game, and I think when there was a couple of subs came on when we were still in the game, and there was some experience on the bench, and they're wearing their number 80 something or other, it did feel like a bit of a point being made that we're a bit thin here. I think losing Torres, big blow, broken metatarsal, I think, isn't it? And that leaves a gap. And January is not a great time to do business. Everyone knows prices are high, and everyone's looking for the same thing, and it'll be tough. But you're right. You've got a great manager there who's done a lot of winning in his career, and I think he knows as well that managers have these windows and short shelf lives. Look at the average tenure of managers, and it tells you that. People were saying Guardiola should be going after the recent run that City had. So I mean, every manager gets that. So he knows that these windows are pretty short. So he'll be pushing to get reinforcement. So I think Doug's right. It's a big transfer window. But yeah, look, enjoy the ride. Yeah, the team are in a great place. Let's maybe this would be the year. It's funny when I talk about the FA Cup. I just know so many Villa fans who say, I've seen us win the European Cup, I've seen us win League Cups, seen us win the league. I've never seen us win the FA Cup. I really want to go and see the team lift that trophy. And we got to a couple of semi-finals in my time. So there's a final in 2015 as well. And I was there that day, and just what an anticlimax. And you know what? I'd take 8th and last 16 in the Champions League and winning the FA Cup this year. I'd get that'd be a pretty good year, wouldn't it?
As Chris and I have said, that would be success to us. But actually, so while we're on the topic of transfers, then Doug, put your chief executive hat on. Paul, put it back on. Maybe what positions are you targeting this month in the window if you're in charge of Aston Villa?
In terms of, first of all, the manager will have, Paul will tell you all about. There's a lot more science goes into spending money and committees and data. So we're in a very data-led world, but I would suggest the data tells us right now that we need a centre back. We have to buy a right back because in games, Cash is particularly when Bailey plays over with him. Cash is very good going forwards, but defensively, not, top six. He's a decent squad player, but we need somebody who's pushing him hard for start every week. And then, the other one for me is I still think that we've got to work out is Duran, and it's controversial. Is he fit for Aston Villa? Does he have all the, everything that we want from a Villa player? Or is it really exciting the fact that he's a little bit out of our comfort zone? So Duran could possibly fund a couple of big signings. Personally, if I was the exec, I'd hold on to him. He's young, he's special, he's raw. And he's got something about it. Is if you look at winners in sport, and there's a great synergy between sport and business, that some of the best people aren't people on track. They're a little bit maverick. Something motivates them. I think he is something incredibly special, and it could go either way. He could become the next Mario Balotelli, but right now, I think, his passion, how raw he is, I want to keep him in my football club and our balance sheet. And I think his value can only go north if he's given a little bit of prescriptive license to shine on a world stage. So
as a Colombian, that warms my heart.
Thank you. So for me, it would be a centre back and a right back, and I would otherwise stick personally.
I'd be talking to the manager going, well, that's why we need the big box.
That's perfect. We actually tend to agree there, and Alex is the president of the John Duran fan club. So I'm very glad, Doug, that you want to keep him around, because Alex would have been quite upset if you wanted to ship him. But I'm the fan. I'm a big fan of Matty Cash because I'm Polish, of Polish descent. So I defend Matty Cash as much as I possibly can. But you're right. He definitely needs somebody to push him, and we just need more cover there. It can't be Matty Cash or Ezri Konsa playing out of position every week. That's the issue we're running into now.
Yeah, and I think in life we're all better when we're challenged.
Yep.
That, you know, whether you're running a business and it's David and Goliath syndrome, that, you know, if you're top of the tree, I think, you know, when you're in a position, and that's been the formula of many great football clubs like Manchester City, they've always had somebody on the bench ready to take your position. I think, you know, Cash, great fan, but, you know, take him away from the football club, that the imbalance when you move Konsa across causes us problems. But for me, gosh, I'd be very, very sad as the manager with Torres out for a couple of months, 2-3 months. He has been the person who's pushed that ball up the inside left channel from the back. He makes football look incredibly simple, and he never ever looks harassed, and he can always find the McGinn or Teenham. I don't know how he does it, because we're all screaming he's going to pass it inside left, and guess what he does? He passes it inside left with aplomb.
Yep. Boy, Doug,
I think the centre back is really important, and because that's how you got to gum up that defence and turn those draws into wins and those losses into draws, and that will make it a successful second half. I mean, if I think back, I mean, I'm trying to remember all the different transfer windows, but certainly in 2007, we managed to bring in John Carew and Ashley Young and Sean Maloney, and that was, Ashley Young, one of the best players I work with, still playing for Everton, absolutely brilliant pro, and was such a reliable guy for Villa for 5 years. Never missed a game. And you think 2011 when we got Darren Bent, and we finished 9th that year, having in January when he arrived, he played his first game against Man City and scored, and I think he got 10 or 11 goals in that half a year, and so it can be really transformational, and it can be that thing where this team have worked and played a lot of games, haven't they? That core over the last sort of couple of years, 3 years, and so I think adding to the squad, giving it a boost, creating that sense of energy, that competition for places that Doug talked about, can be really important. But then there's, say 19 others, certainly a good chunk of other clubs also looking to do the same. So it certainly won't be easy.
Doug, if you're not careful, we're going to invite you back on, because you are spot on with your I agree with everything you say. You're crushing it here with your analysis. So at this rate, you're going to be a co-host if you keep it up. So, I wanted to finish, because I know we're running short on time here, but I wanted to finish by highlighting what you guys both do, your charity work in and around the Midlands and elsewhere. So we'll start with Doug. Alex mentioned that you sent the Christmas e-card, and it sounds like you're involved in a lot of exciting projects right now around the Midlands. Is there anything you'd like to highlight personally?
Yeah, I think that, when I was 20, I had a pretty horrific car accident and ended up in hospital for a little while. And, it was kind of light bulb moments. And I think my sort of take on everything in life is that you need to always think about your community and the impact you can make. And I talk to many old people, young people, and impact is way more than money. It's about, loving thy neighbor, finding out how you can help somebody, whether it's an old person, a young person who's struggling. So for all of us, if we all work far harder together for the betterment of our community, the world is a better place. So yeah, charity, we're relying on charities in the Midlands now, because, as funding's pulled from councils, our community is creating solutions. So for me, since I started as a little boy at McDonald's and now have a McDonald's franchise, I've always tried to keep on the inside of my car windscreen that I must use my business success as a force for good to help others. And that can be helping others in so many different ways, but we are better as one, and we are far more aligned when we're kinder to other people. So, we've just come out of a festive period. there's lots of homeless people and lots of people struggling. So when starting a career, whether you're in the middle of it, whether you're coming toward the end of it, always think about how you can do that little piece which can make our community a better place. So that would be my spin.
And I mean, the thing I would, look, obviously you echo all of that. I think Doug's expressed that very, very eloquently. And just want to make a little pitch and unashamedly plug for a charity called Kids Village that Doug is the chair of, and spent some time as interim chief exec, and talked about Katrina Cook, who's the chief exec now, involved as a trustee. And what Kids Village is aiming to do is to build a holiday village just outside of Birmingham, so probably 15, 20 miles from Villa Park for all the Villa fans watching, in some beautiful English countryside. And we're going to build 10 lodges for families where they can come and stay in a central space. And the idea is that it's a respite. So this is for children who've gone through horrible treatments for illnesses, maybe just gone through a year or 2 years of chemotherapy. And you imagine the stresses and the strains that puts on a family, where mum is having to stay with the child up in the hospital, dad's staying at work, or maybe the other way around, and they're living 100 miles apart. There's siblings involved, and suddenly the focus of the family is all on the sick child, and they feel left out. And what Kids Village is going to do is to try to give people a little magical respite break, where it's about positivity, it's about being out in nature. They won't have to pay for it, it will all be sort of funded, and you're going to stay there for any number of days, up to a week. And we're going to sort of have wonderful links with theme parks around here. There's one called Alton Towers, other sort of attractions. We're hoping to do stuff with people like Aston Villa as well, where we'll take kids out on sort of money can't buy trips and experiences. And it's based on a model that exists in the States. The lady who founded it, Sam, and her father, she went through cancer treatment 20 years ago and recovered, and her and her family spent some time in Orlando. Now, we don't quite have the weather that they have in Orlando here or Disney World right now, but we're going to do something kind of similar. And so we're very passionate about that. We've been involved now for about 18 months, and we're trying to raise £5 million to do it, which, is not a huge amount of money. It's a lot, not a huge amount. We've made a good start. They've had about £1.5 million pledged so far, and we've just in the process now of starting to break ground on the site and to put a site office up there, and so people will be able to visualize it and see it. And so that's something we're very passionate about. We can't wait to see that completed. So we've got another £3.5 million to raise, and we're out there talking to corporate connections and wonderful people who've been fortunate in life who want to give back, and all sorts of folk like that, lots of people in the community. But yeah, if there's anyone in America who's watching this, or anywhere around the world, and they want to find out more, then please track Doug and myself down, or I'm sure there'll be some links to us or to Kids Village.
Yeah, we'll definitely put that in the show description for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, send us the link, and we'll put it in the description here, so that way people can link it, and we'll do that. Absolutely.
Listen, the last thing I wanted to say was to obviously thank you both. And I think that our thank you comes with a small caveat. What we would like to do, Paul and I, is we'd like to, for all the people who listen to you, Paul was, instrumental in making Villa Park accessible to me. So what we'd like to do is offer everybody on the podcast, you guys, Alex and Chris, can go through the mechanics, but we'd love to have two people offer them tickets to a game next year, complimentary on ourselves. So there it is. So that
wow,
we are a global football club, and from the two of us, we invite two people, whether you have a competition or however you do it.
We'll have to figure that out.
Yeah. That's our gift, and our how we'll leave it today. That please keep talking about Aston Villa. Global reach is everything, and ultimately to see the passion you have. And I will never forget how much merchandise you guys had bought. You could barely walk up the stairs, and I said they're either
you're going to put us on class like that,
or I was waiting for you the crazy football fans, or I was waiting for security to run after me. They looted the club shop. So listen, it is a magical place for the park. So there's 2 tickets from us, and then come to any game next season. So they'll have to fund the trip themselves. But it is like, for anyone who's read Willy Wonka, those are 2 golden tickets that through your podcast you can distribute. So thank you for having myself and Paul on today. We've loved it, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been. And look, ultimately, Villa fans, we're the lucky ones. Yeah, could support other teams, but hey, it's Aston Villa. There's no club that's better, and be it the good times and the bad times, it's a special club. And say enjoy the ride, enjoy the journey, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys again. And thank you, as Doug said, for having us on. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. That's so generous and a lovely incentive to get people to listen all the way through. That's great for our numbers. So we appreciate that too. Really, thank you so much. This was awesome. Know our listeners are going to love it, and really just appreciate your generosity with your time, obviously for the tickets as well. And we really look forward to staying in touch and hopefully seeing you guys soon.
Yeah, we'll see you at Villa Park. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, we're back. I'm kind of speechless.
Yeah, that threw us for a loop there. We did not know that was coming.
No, we did not. We're gonna need to figure out some sort of giveaway mechanism. So maybe added incentive to everybody who's still listening. If you just heard Doug's incredibly generous giveaway that we'll be executing, stay tuned to your feeds. Follow us on social. We will announce a way to give away those tickets soon. Probably some entry. Follow randomized selection method. But yeah, we'll need to consult our legal department to figure that one out. But Chris, we knew this from when we met them, but what great guys. Yeah. So insightful, so generous with their time. And I think so kind, but really learned a lot about the club, the inner workings, Birmingham. That was everything we wanted it to be.
Absolutely. And Doug is a sharp football mind. I got to tell you, Doug Wright, MBE, really, really hit us well with the analysis. And obviously everybody knows Paul Faulkner from his time as CEO. So there was no surprise there to see insight from him. It was what a pleasure for both those. Just 2 of the most genuinely nice people that you and I just happened to meet, like Doug said, in a stairwell at Villa Park. That's it. That's how this happened.
All I have to say is he likes my guy more than yours.
So do I, in fairness. I like Matty Cash, but if you're going to tell me I have to pick Matty Cash or John Duran, it's John Duran. That's insane. Man. Okay.
But yeah. Well, what an interview. What great guys. Doug, Paul, if you're listening, still listening, thank you again from the bottom of our hearts. Really appreciate it. And just can't wait to see and hopefully talk to those guys again.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Well, we will have, for a little bit of housekeeping before we forget, West Ham preview probably out tomorrow evening in advance of Friday. Got a few more episodes before I leave for Japan, and Chris goes solo or brings on a couple other co-hosts. Maybe Doug. Now, maybe Doug. I'll call him for a little bit of banter. But yeah, so stay tuned to all of that. But as always, thanks for listening. And until tomorrow, up the Villa.
Up the Villa.
Hi, Mom and Dad.